The spiritual journey begins on the horizontal level with the recognition that the ego is trapped in these three malas, three stains, three defective levels of consciousness. And the vertical dimension of the journey cannot begin until one has freed the consciousness from these three malas. Technically, all that is necessary is breaking free of the anava mala. If you crack that one, then you will enter into the ajata siddhanta. But the problem is that the three malas are interwoven and interpenetrating. And so there's a catch-22 aspect about the situation, that you can't usually break through the anava mala until you have also dealt with and overcome the karma mala and the maya mala. And they tend to be the ones that the ego is most attached to and finds it most difficult to let go of. So it takes a lot of very honest observation of oneself. And the freeing of whatever energies have been bound up in addictive processes, or in avoiding loneliness, gossiping, colluding, judging other people, projecting on them. If you find that there are certain people you can't love and other people who you only are attracted to, and if you find that you are interested in manipulating and colluding to get influence and power and territory, and all of those kinds of things, then all of your mental energy is going into your karma mala and your maya mala. And there isn't enough energy or willpower or motivation to transcend the ego, because you're trying to protect a status and a territory and a position and all of those things. And there will be no energy left for transcendence. And if you're particularly interested in the sex drive and you're still interested in food enjoyments or other drugs or those kinds of things, you're not going to be able to establish a love of God. You're not even going to be able to know what love really is. You'll assume it's something that comes with human desire, and you'll never understand the truth of love. And so you'll not be able to make a connection to God. And if you can't connect to God and have no interest in overcoming the malas, then you've indeed got some mala suerte to deal with. But it's a very important situation that you recognize that these are the problems, these are the obstacles, and have a will to overcome them. And have a will to overcome an inaccurate relationship to the world, so that you're not addictively relating to the internet or conspiracy theories or all the very limited thought patterns that the mind tends to cultivate and get stuck in, and therefore unable to see the really big picture, because you're looking at all these tiny pictures and becoming obsessed with them. So the cleansing of the doors of perception is what is necessary. And they cannot be cleansed so long as you're looking through the filters of the ego. It's only when you have recognized that the ego itself is the dirt on the door of perception that you're able to let it fall away. And that's when the first stage of the vertical dimension of the spiritual journey begins. And that's what we called last night the Advaita Siddhanta. The Advaita Siddhanta is not the end, it's the beginning of the vertical segment of the spiritual journey. It's only once that you have reached Advaita, the level that you know you are unborn, and this world was only a projection, and your ego a nightmare within that projection. And you let go of the nightmare of the ego and then the projection of the world itself. And all of that falls away, that finally you will be able to have Shiva Siddhanta. You will be able to have a relationship with God. But until you have gone beyond the ego, you won't be able to comprehend or connect to God. And you won't be able to be coherent. You won't be able to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. Not the puzzle of who you are or the greater puzzle of why everything is happening as it is in the matrix. If you want to understand all of that, you have to have the perspective of God consciousness. It cannot be understood by any limited ego mind. So it's in the Shiva Siddhanta that things become clear. But even that's not the end of the journey. There's a level of understanding beyond that, which is the Shiva Shakti Siddhanta. And until you understand that, you won't be able to understand what love's got to do with it. And you won't be able to understand the two principles of the masculine and feminine. And you will never be able to fully adopt either principle or relate to the other. You will never be able to integrate and unify both of them. And it's only when those two have been integrated at the level of the archetype, not the level of the human, not the level of the degraded copy of the archetype, that real divine love will be your nature. And it's from that that bliss arises. And only then will you be able to experience the Paramashiva Siddhanta, that supreme level of consciousness that has given birth to the principle of duality, of yin and yang, and of the Tao that understands how to navigate through the world of duality, and to understand how to bring beauty and joy and wisdom and coherence and love and law in harmony to the principle of Prakriti. Only when Prakriti and Purusha are in accurate relationship can then the world be sustained. This is when the Vishnu Siddhanta comes into play. But until you understand creation, you cannot understand sustenance, and you will not be able to understand destruction and transformation. And you will not be able to understand the even deeper secret that is contained in the Egyptian esoteric understanding of the dismemberment of God. You remember Osiris is dismembered and has to be put together. What is that archetype teaching us? There's a dismemberment of consciousness that has resulted in all of the various religions, all of which have a slightly different take on ultimate reality. Even though they are congruent at the highest level, they are different at the level of not only their folk mythology, but even of their symbolic theological conceptions. And you can only understand what those derived from when you understand the level of consciousness which was communicated to the prophets who developed those understandings and gave them as gifts to humanity. Only when all of those dismembered aspects of archetypal consciousness have been unified and the totality of the real has been brought together in a single perception, a single aha, a single total transcendence of the puzzle, a single realization that liberates you from needing to discover something that isn't yet understood, because there is still some lack within one's own level of being. It is only when that final piece of the puzzle has been found and put into place that liberation and graduation from this game will be achieved. So, the beginning process of dealing with the malas of the ego should be dealt with and put away as soon as possible, so that the real interesting level of the game can begin. But if you're still dealing with the Rubik's Cube of the ego, you haven't even begun to understand who you are and what you are capable of when you have transcended the ego, and to be able to actualize all of that in real time. This is what must be done, and the clock is ticking. And even though real time is part of the illusion of Maya, it's very real for the one who is in Maya. And we must recognize the necessity to get it, to grok it, so that our perception of reality changes and we can see what is now invisible. Because the ego filters out the subtler aspects of reality, and therefore you cannot respond accurately. You cannot see the teleological influences that want to guide you in a certain direction. You cannot see your own resistances to jumping through the windows of opportunity when they open, and they will close again before you get it together to make your move. You must be accurate, and at every moment you must be able to make the leap into the next level when it appears. When the door opens, you must go through. If you hesitate, you are lost. This is a very high-stakes game. Play it with complete seriousness and make your seriousness complete play, because it's all unreal, but that unreality is the gateway to the real. And if we ever want to get to the real, we have to get beyond the childish games of the ego. And this is the moment to let go of childish things and to realize our responsibility as manifestations of God. Let us open our third eye. Let us begin to perceive reality from the union with God that is achieved by going beyond the unreal ego. And once we are led from the unreal to the real, we will be led from the tamasic to the luminous light and power of God. And from there we will be led from mortality, from this realm of death, to the immortal beauty, joy, bliss, power of the God Self that we are, and that it is our birthright to regain. But that once and future glory can only come when you have put the ego to rest once and for all time. And now is the time for the attainment of that ultimate yearning of your own heart that must overcome the lower chakra malas of the ego's penchant for self-defeat.